Mankind's fascination with the moon goes back hundreds of years, but it was in the 20th century when we were technologically able to finally reach it. America was lagging behind in the space race. The Soviets had already put a man in space and sent a probe to the moon, but US President John F. Kennedy was determined that they would be the first to set foot as a waiting world looked on.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Sadly for President Kennedy, he didn't live to see his vision realized, but the dream lived on, and on the 20th of July 1969, man set foot upon the moon. So, where were you during that historic occasion?
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I recall sitting up with my father and my mother watching it happen on a black and white screen which was flickering all the time. I didn't give it much importance at the time because, well, a man on the moon, I'd seen all these cartoons about astronauts and space travel. But then it dawned on me that it was quite a leap into the unknown and a big step for mankind.
And we watched it on TV, I think. It was a short time we'd had the TV at that time.
Well, I remember watching them land as a kid, and then my dad said go to bed, and he woke me up I think about 3 in the morning and said, look, they're about to come out of the capsule, and I sat there glued to the screen watching Armstrong land on the moon, walk on the moon.
It's very exciting seeing them land. I believe they stepped on the moon on the 21st in the early hours of the morning. So yeah, something to remember.
My dog was born that day.
Your?
My dog. And his name was Armstrong.
Well, I was in Cornwall at the time in Great Britain, yeah. And the only place we could see it was on a black and white TV screen in a caravan site, because we were in a chalet at the time. Because even then, not everybody had TVs, yeah.
I did because I had a black and white television, and I saw it black and white. I'll never forget it.
I was 24 years old, so I do remember it.
I remember that I left my children stayed all night till they land. So because I thought it was a case, history case, so I left them get on all night there. I never let them get up late, but that day I did.
I remember that we looked through the window to see if we can see something. Remember your father, your brother Adolfo saying to Minerva, "Can you see them?" Yes.
So. It was in July, wasn't it? It was in July. Well, what I remember is that it was the Gibraltar Fair at Alameda Parade. And I remember standing there and saying, just to think that there are humans on the moon surface looking at the world.
Human innovation and perseverance. There may not be a Gibraltarian connection to the moon landings, but it was an event that defined a species. One of the more incredible aspects of this story is that the world, or rather those who had television in 1969, was watching. And in this day and age, with events like royal weddings or parliament sessions being streamed on television, pictures from space were being beamed to homes all around the world.
I was 9, so nearly 59 now. I remember it was 5 o'clock in the morning. I was nearly fast asleep. And I remember there was it's curious, there was Crutch's Rump bakery there from Allied Bakery, and they were doing hot baguettes, very warm baguettes at 10, 11 o'clock at night. So people were queuing there and buying baguettes to take it home. It was black and white, and I watched with my father, my mother and my grandmother, and curiously, that was one of the moments that I started with astronomy, because after that, my father bought me a telescope. And that evolved into what I loved about astronomy. So other peoples I've talked to the same, they remember my age, some of them don't remember, they stayed asleep, and the older people do remember that moment. And it was incredible because, nobody knew what was going to happen. They didn't even know if they were going to reach there, and it was a 50% chance. Remember, Richard Nixon, who was the president at the time, even had a speech done in case they didn't make it back to Earth, that would have stayed on the moon. So it was actually 50%. It wasn't certain.
So when does humanity return? President Donald Trump has vowed to put a man or woman back on the moon during the course of the next decade. Time will tell, But, to quote another US President, Richard Nixon, the heavens have become a part of man's world. And that is a sentiment that rings true today. Heading into the future, who knows? Perhaps Gibraltarians too will one day reach for and land on the moon.